Alright, it's been a while, but I'm ready for this. I'm finally playing another Sword Art Online game. Man, I just can't wait to see the beautiful medieval world of Greirat once more. Who would have thought that I would have actually missed it? Luckily, the series never implements drastic changes, so everything will just be as per usual. That's just how it's going to be. It's been like that for the past 3 games, and it would be crazy if all of a sudden they would pick a completely different setting. Okay, really freaking funny. I wasn't gone for that long. Really? A different setting? How did we go from a medieval world like Greirat to this? A post-apocalyptic dump of a desert. Oh well. The setting is probably the only thing that has changed, right? Right? Well, in Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, we ditched the medieval fantasy setting of swords and shields and magic and replaced it with a post-apocalyptic one with guns and explosions. This is an obvious big change to the format that the previous games had. But that is only the beginning. Other big changes that you will notice right from the start are the story and the main character. Fatal Bullet's story takes, just like the other games, place in the alternative timeline of the Sword Art Online series. However, in this story, you don't follow Kirito and his gang. Instead, the character that you make is the main character of the story, which is a fantastic thing. In the previous game, we got a small taste of how it would be to play your own character in a Sword Art Online story. Now in Fatal Bullet, we actually get a shot at a full experience, which again is great and really exciting. Your character's story starts with your old childhood friend inviting you to hang out in a VR game called Gun Gale Online. While you're there, she invites you to join in on a little event to help her out obtaining a super rare item. Of course, because you are a protagonist in a Sword Art Online story, you find that item. This item turns out to be a very rare, super duper amazing AI android companion. Which is already lucky, but your luck hasn't run out yet, because it turns out your new AI companion is a requirement for Gun Gale Online's newest expansion. So with your newly gained AI companion and your childhood friend, you set off to gather the required items and resources to become the best player in Gun Gale Online and be the first to beat the newest expansion. Veteran players and fans of Sword Art Online might recognize a certain pattern in this story. Sword Art Online story writing usually contains a lot of convenience, which I don't mind so much, as Sword Art Online stories are in my opinion more about the characters themselves than an overarching plot. But I am a bit bothered that the overarching plot here is a repeat of stories told in previous installments. Despite the story being a repeat, the setup of it was really strong. In fact, the strongest so far in the series. You get full control of who the main character and the AI companion is going to be. People you meet and the friends you make during the story are completely new and unique characters to the series. And while Kirito and gang are still in the game and you interact with them, it did not feel like you were just another add-on to that group. All of these things contributed to the feeling that this story was my own story. As far as it could be my own, because despite the fact that you don't play as the Chad Kirito, your character is still a Chad of a gamer like Kirito. You are introduced and seen as a noob by everyone, but after doing 1 or 2 simple things, everyone basically considers you to be the best player that ever walked on this earth. Problems you faced are solved in minutes by you or others, and every challenge is overcome easily by simply doing it. Unfortunately, after the strong start of the story, it quickly then leaves you hanging with nothing for the rest of the game. Doing barely anything with its setup and only touches some topics or plot when the story is nearing its end. Which at that point is kinda useless, as the story is too weak and badly constructed that you can make any good impact on it anymore. The Sword Art Online series in general is really good at setting up interesting plot ideas and topics, and Fatal Bullet is no exception to that rule. Gun Gale Online is a VR environment that offers you an experience close to real life where you shoot other people with guns. And one of the characters had a problem with this and started a discussion about if experiencing shooting other people with guns in a game is a good thing and if it should be a thing to begin with. It's basically an evolved version of the shooting other people in games is bad discussion that many people have surrounding games like GTA or Call of Duty. However, to me, this topic carried much more weight here, as in this environment, the lines of our own reality, but also how we experience a virtual one, are very blurred. It was great to see that in a game like this, such a topic was pulled to the fore by a character. But it was not so great that said character that struggled with the before mentioned topic pushed it away as something unimportant and solved the moral problem of shooting at other people by literally going guns blazing at other people 10 seconds later. And it was really frustrating to see this happening, and it was even more frustrating and disappointing to see Fatal Bullet treating its main story and all the side topics like this. It's a huge waste, and while it's not uncommon in the Sword Art Online series, it is a shame. It's also a huge step backwards from the previous installment, as there this problem was avoided. Character interaction, on the other hand, is a much stronger element in this series. There's a broad cast of characters, and while they do feel very hollow at times as they heavily lean on stereotypes, they do have their moments where they transcend above that and become more dynamic, making them interesting, likable, and overall good characters. And in these moments, character interaction truly makes up for the lackluster writing and story development. In Fatal Bullet, we even have a very unique situation with the group of characters. For the first time, our own character takes the spotlight over from Kirito and his gang. And the characters you are surrounded with are also completely new characters to the series, which makes the total amount of characters in this game bigger than ever was before in the series, but more importantly, the possibilities with character interaction is even bigger. It's therefore very unfortunate that Fatal Bullet does not capitalize on this unique situation. The amount and way of interactions you have with all these characters is very weak in comparison with what came before, and it's just not good enough to support this large group of characters. In the previous installments, most interactions were unlocked as you progressed. This meant you as the player had a lot of control over how much time you spend with each character. Of course, if you want to romance your favorite Sword Art Online waifu, you had to spend extra time with said character by going on adventures or taking them on dates. In Fatal Bullet, the direct opposite approach is taken. Interaction now is connected to how much time you already spend with a character. If you don't increase affinity with a character, you barely get to see them or interact with them. There are no side events where you randomly meet a character in the world, or where the group gets together once a while to just hang out or have some fun little banter with one another. Those kind of moments brought for me these characters to life, and it are those moments that I really miss the most in this game. Without those, characters feel very lifeless, like they only exist and live when you are around. And that feeling is strengthened by the fact that many characters were rarely present in my playthrough, as I didn't take extra time to grind affinity points with them. Now, if the grind was worth it, I would consider doing it, but the interactions that you do get feel very hollow. The old cast of characters felt like quick fan service moments. They still are voice acted by the same cast as in the previous games and in the anime, but interacting with them barely added anything fun or interesting to your experience. While the new cast of characters barely got any breathing space to properly develop and establish themselves. On top of that, the interactions are quickly steered right towards romance instead of just fun little moments together. Presentation-wise, things change drastically as well. Conversations are still in a visual novel style, but instead of using anime art style for the characters, they use the in-game character models, which is cool because your own character gets an actual presence in them now. But that did make it harder to read characters' face expressions and body language, and overall visually it looked a bit cheap when compared to the cutscenes of this game. There they also used the in-game models, but it looked way better in every aspect. I now wish they used that more instead. They also tried to make things more interesting by introducing dialogue choices. However, the options given are mostly cosmetic. Your dialogue choices are most of the time the same answer, but just worded differently. And in only very rare cases, the choices you make actually mattered. These were good tries, but it didn't help much to make the character interaction feel less hollow. To me, it felt like it was there just for the romance aspect. Yet you can't build a good romance, characters or story without proper development and build-up. Overall, just like the story, character interaction feels like a huge step backwards compared to the previous installment. However, Fatal Bullet had one ace up its sleeve, and that's a thing that it did better than any other game in the series. After 3 games, the combat is completely turned upside down by changing it from a hack and slash to a third-person looter shooter. Shooting itself felt alright in the game. Depending on the weapon, the feedback can be really good or really bad. Maybe I was just unlucky, but my gun sound effect constantly didn't trigger. Visual feedback was also really minimal, so the only reason I knew I was hitting something was because of the numbers that popped up from my enemy. When you start this game, I highly recommend that you're trying out different weapons and see which one works for you and which ones don't work for you. Because keep in mind, it's a looter shooter, so you have to switch main weapon from time to time. There is a good amount of options to choose from, but luckily the weapons themselves don't come with a huge backlog of sub-versions that you also need to keep in mind when picking your weapon. If you really can't stand the idea of using guns, you can go the Kirito route and grab one of these wannabe lightsabers. Next to the weapons you have skills and gadgets. Skills you unlock by leveling up and unlocking them. Through skills you can buff yourself and your allies. You can also heal your allies with healing bullets or set your enemies ablaze with special shots. Gadgets are very similar to skills. Think of grenades, healing kits, mines and melee attacks. Originally I put my faith more in gadgets than in skills, which was a bit of a miscalculation, as skills are much more useful. Plus, the way gadgets work is rough. Throwing a grenade, for example, is a nightmare in this game. Most of the time when throwing a grenade, I felt like a drunk person trying to nail a basketball shot. My grenade flew everywhere except for where I wanted to go. So yeah, time was much better spent on using skills. Though at the start, picking skills was a hassle as well. There's not only a lot to pick from, but skills are weapon type bound as well. Meaning that some skills can be done with certain weapons, while others are unique to a specific weapon. So I highly advise you to first try to figure out which gun you're most likely to use before investing into skills. Or at least pick skills at the start that are available for most guns. Of course you have your friends in combat as well, and they are helpful at times, I guess. The AI is a little bit brain dead. If it weren't for you playing the game, they probably would never make it past the first few enemies of the game. The most useful companion that you can have on the battlefield is your AI companion, as you can fully customize him/her builds, gadgets, skills, weapons and combat priority, aka just make her your squad healer. Lastly, the newest biggest add-on to the combat is this gun called the Ultimate Fiber Gun, or UFG for short. It's basically the grapple hook system from Just Cause, just much clunkier. And because of that, in most cases I saw no value in using it. The level design sometimes forces you to do so, and in some cases you can actually shortcut complete dungeons with it, but I was completely fine with keeping my feet on the ground and just walk all the way. Overall, the first few hours of the combat are a lot of fun. It's exciting, lots of options and systems to learn and experiment with. However, I fear this fun time was temporarily, as for me these games turn sour after a while. At some point in any looter shooter game, it starts to sacrifice your fun for the sake of numbers. You need to start swapping guns you like using for the ones you don't like, purely because their stats are better. While at the same time every encounter, normal enemies or bosses, become uninteresting and drawn out as the scaling of numbers goes completely out of hand. Whenever I reach that moment, I find myself not enjoying the game as much anymore, and the further I get, the more of a struggle it feels to play the game. And Fatal Bullet is no exception to the rule of sacrifice your fun for the sake of numbers. Yet it did manage to stay fun for most of the time, or at least had a solution to make the struggle a lot more bearable. As a fan of shooters, it feels like heresy to say this, but the solution to my problem was an assist mode. If you get into a situation where you have to use a weapon you are not good at, but the stats are a lot better, then you just turn on the assist mode for a while. Does the game throw one of these many ridiculous difficulty spikes at you? Turn on the assist mode. And every boss is a bullet sponge, so just turn on the assist mode and weather the storm until it's over. When assist mode is on, the target you aim at gets this green circle, which gets smaller the longer you aim. The smaller the circle, the bigger your chances to hit that target. However, there are many moments where manual firing has a much bigger advantage than using the assist mode. Enemies have weak spots and shooting them makes the fight easier, and of course the assist mode doesn't target those spots. However, that is just an option, you can choose to keep assist mode on all the time. It wouldn't even be such a bad idea as assist mode does change one important element in the combat, which also makes it a little bit interesting. When assist mode is on, your shots are based on stats instead of your aim. And those stats can be increased, be it by buffs or your character build. Which is exactly what I did halfway through the game, which again did not avoid the struggle, but made it more bearable and therefore stayed fun for longer. But that was just my build, you can choose to go a completely different path, that's fine. Fatal Bullet's combat really shows its best element, giving players control over their character in many aspects. Be it looks, your companion, guns or way of fighting. There's just a lot of freedom. Freedom that I have never seen in a Sword Art Online game before. Yet Fatal Bullet also offers you a mode that takes away that freedom. And when it's been taken away, it becomes really clear that there's not a lot of good things left in the game. This brings me to the Kirito Mode. Near the end of the game, you unlock Kirito Mode. In this mode, you, play as Kirito, in a small side story that follows in broad lines a similar story that the Gun Gale Online anime follows. This mode is in no shape or form good. In the 1 to 2 hours it rushes you through a story arc that doesn't do any justice to its very cool, interesting story premise. Combat freedom is taken away completely from you as you are forced to play a certain build which chances are you are not familiar to. Overall, Kirito Mode just felt like an interruption of my experience for no good reason. Because I don't consider beating Kirito Mode worth it. The only reason to complete it is if you want to see the romance scenes with the original cast of characters. Fatal Bullet brings a lot of new things to the table. You are the star of the main story and get to create how he/she is going to look and fight. Unfortunately, the story is badly written and weak for most of the time, despite a very strong start. It was a big disappointment for me that interesting topics and stories were brushed off and wasted completely. Especially when compared to the previous installment where for the first time was shown that a Sword Art Online story could work if properly written. But to be fair, this disappointment was not a deal breaker for me, as Sword Art Online writing in general has a tendency to do this. The biggest loss for me was the character interaction and romance in Fatal Bullet. It has all the characters from the previous games and even completely new and unique ones to the series. But interacting with them was just very hollow and weak, which was a shame as the new cast of characters showed good potential in the little bit we explored them. The old cast of characters on the other hand could have been a good way to connect your experience with the previous games to Fatal Bullet. But instead they were downgraded to quick fan services, which doesn't do them justice. Combat, however, shows this game's strength. This is the biggest change that Fatal Bullet brought to the table, and it's a really good one. Going from hack and slash to a third-person looter shooter is a ballsy move. The shooting itself did not carry much impact, but your build and choices in skills and gadgets most certainly do. I really enjoyed this combat system, and to me it really captures and highlights how much fun a Sword Art Online game can be when given freedom in many aspects. I would consider Fatal Bullet in terms of gameplay to be the best of the series so far, but in terms of story, Fatal Bullet is one of the weakest. Still, recommending this game is kinda rough, even to Sword Art Online fans. The combat is good fun, but if guns and such are not your thing and don't care for the gameplay in general and just want to date your favorite Sword Art Online waifu, then I recommend you check out Hollow Realization instead, as Fatal Bullet should mainly be played for its gameplay. If you're not a fan of the series, I really can't recommend this to you. The gameplay actually made me consider it for a moment, but ultimately I would recommend other looter shooter games over this one.